When a man with a .45 meets a man with a rifle, you said the man with the pistol's a dead man. Let's see if that's true.
This video essay will analyse how music and sound design affect the narrative construction of the spaghetti western. It will focus on the dual sequence of Sergio Leone's The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, and the final scene of Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained. Firstly, it will analyse why westerns became so popular in Italy in the late 60s at the expense of the mythological epic film. Secondly, the figure of Sergio Leone and his aesthetics will be introduced, focusing on the differences between the classic western and Leone's point of view. Thirdly, the figure of Quentin Tarantino will be introduced, with a particular interest in the concept of intertextuality. Fourthly, sound design in the genre of spaghetti western will be analysed, with particular attention on the presence of unusual elements in the orchestras and the role of diegetic sounds. Finally, there is an analysis structured in two sections, one for each sequence. It will focus on how sound affects our perception of time and space, and the consequences of this distortion on the narrative construction. Part 1. Rise of the Western. Before the 60s, the place of westerns was occupied by what many Italians used to call mythological epic films. Started in the 40s with the fascism encouraging the ancient Greek and Latin culture, the genre continued to exist until the early 60s. The decline of the mythological epic films and the rise of the westerns can be related to social changes, development of technology, and spread of consumerism. Whereas the epic was designed for a more infantile public, western films were thought for a more mature audience. In mythological epics, the hero solves his problems with muscles, without the help of technology. Instead, in westerns, the hero solves his problems with guile and technique. Part 2. Sergio Leone. I grew up with neorealism, but I have always been thinking that cinema for me was a proposal of myth, and through it also telling some certain ghosts that everyone has inside. After working as assistant and second unit director in important productions such as Ben-Hur, Quo Vadis and Bicycle Thieves, Leone started directing his own films in 1959. It was clear that his intentions were not to show reality, like in neorealism, but to propose his own vision of an idealized image, in his case, Far West. To the question of what differences do you find between Ford's films and yours, Leone replied, "In Ford's films, when an actor opens a window, it is always to look at the immense future in front of him. In mine, while opening a window, they fear. They are afraid of getting a bullet between the eyes." In this statement, we can find one of the main differences between classic and spaghetti westerns, that is essentially the character's attitudes towards the Far West's cruelty. While in classic westerns, the hero is moved by feelings such as justice and duty. In the spaghetti, the hero becomes a cynical gringo looking for money. Now the character's odysseys are no longer quests for self-knowledge. They are treasure hunts, endless hedonistic gold rushes. The definition itself of the dollar trilogy, a fistful of dollars for a few dollars more, and the good, the bad and the ugly, can suggest to us that what motivates all these characters is money. Part 3. Quentin Tarantino.
Big Daddy's getting away.
Good.
His success may be due to his talent, but his popularity is due to the way he taps effortlessly into the pop culture stew that nourished him. One of the most important aspects of Tarantino's aesthetics is intertextuality. His films are full of intertextual references, allusions, and quotes from pop culture and film tradition, and also for the film analysed in this case. In Django Unchained, it is possible to identify several intertextual references, such as the film itself, as Django Unchained is basically inspired by Corbucci's Django. The music, as Tarantino uses many songs from older westerns. Franco Nero's cameo, the original Django.
What's your name?
Django. The D is silent.
I know.
The resulting effect of all these references and allusions is a creation of a complex narrative that plays on audiences' memories and culture. However, even with the presence of such references, Tarantino's films deeply differs from the original spaghetti western. Firstly, it is possible to follow Django's growth from slave to bounty hunter. This element is not present in most of 60s spaghetti, as the hero is introduced as a skilled man without referencing his past. Secondly, it is possible to identify a sort of friendship between Django and Dr. Schultz. Usually, in a traditional spaghetti, the hero is a lonely individual, and in most cases, he forges relationships just to reach his goal.
Cigar? Liable to interfere with my aim.
Part 4. Music and Diegesis. Since A Fistful of Dollars came out, it is possible to hear how music contributes to the renewal of the Western genre. In the case of spaghetti, the Italian composer Ennio Morricone fully succeed in releasing film music from the genre conventions. This reinvention of music for westerns is audible in the use of traditional instruments, uncommonly used instruments, and unconventional elements within the ensemble. For instance, a traditional element such as the human voice is used mainly for whistles and male choirs, just for its acoustic timbre. In the case of The Good, the Bad and the Ugly's main theme, the voice tries to imitate a coyote's call, as Morricone said several times. Conversely, untraditional instruments take the place of the traditional elements. Now instruments such as electric guitars, ocarinas and Jew's harps have their own place within the ensemble. In a similar way, unconventional elements such as whips and pieces of metal become part of the orchestra. In short, what happened in the music for a spaghetti is that traditional instruments are treated more as noises, and noises are treated as musical instruments. The swapping of traditional and uncommon elements is due to two main reasons. Firstly, this fact fully reflects Leone's intention to deconstruct the classic western. Secondly, because spaghetti westerns were born as low-budget productions, so Leone could not afford a full orchestra. For this reason, Morricone had to think of a new way to depict the director's Far West. After the success of A Fistful of Dollars, and for a few dollars more, Morricone could count on a bigger production and consequently on a bigger ensemble, making The Good, the Bad and the Ugly a balanced mix of tradition and innovation. Part 5. Analytic Comparison. There are some similarities and differences between the two analysed films. One of the main similarities can be found in the structure of the two sequences. They both can be divided into three phases, which are a tension build-up, a breaking point, and a resolution. In addition to this, in both sequences, there are mainly two kinds of sound, music and diegetic sound. Many academics argue the diegetic sounds form part of the story world, for example, gunshots or dialogue.
Bye, Miss Laura.
In turn, diegetic sounds can be on-screen and off-screen. In opposition to diegesis, there are non-diegetic sounds, which are all those sounds outside of the story world, in this case, the music. The main difference between Leone's film and Tarantino's film is the use of diegetic and non-diegetic sounds, and how these kind of sounds affect the rhythm and perceived space. In The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, the main sonic element is the non-diegetic music, while in Django Unchained, the main sonic elements are diegetic sounds. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. Phase 1. The build-up. At the beginning, it is possible to hear the surrounding ambience thanks to off-screen diegetic sounds, suggesting a space extending beyond the visible action. Initially, the music has no regular rhythm, and this causes tension. Then, the tension is solved, since the music assumes a regular rhythm. Moreover, from this moment it is not possible to hear the surrounding ambience, so the perceived space fits just to what is displayed in the frame. Now, with the regular rhythm, it is possible to obtain the opposite effect, that is building up the tension again. The persistence of regularity can induce the audience to wait for irregularity, causing a tense situation. Phase 2. Breaking point. The music stops with an interval of a fourth, without concluding the chord sequence and letting the environment to emerge. Again, like at the beginning, there is a space extending. As Walter Murch suggests, the silence after a climax has a visceral effect on the audience, and it also allows to build up the volume again, which is exactly what happens next. Phase 3. Resolution. It repeats the same procedure. Initially, the music has irregular rhythm, then it assumes a regular one. It is important to notice that, visually talking, the editing gets a little bit faster and the camera gets closer to the character's face. The sudden change in rhythm produces a temporal vectorization, projecting the images towards a future goal and causing tension. At the same time, the editing gets faster and the frame displays extreme close-ups of the character's eyes. The tension built up during the whole sequence is solved after Angel Eye's death, and again it is only possible to hear just the surrounding environment. As said before, this expands the audience's space perception and enhances the drama of the moment. Django Unchained. Phase 1. Build-up. The big difference between Django Unchained and The Good, the Bad and the Ugly is that in Tarantino's film, the music occupies a smaller part in the sequence. Here, the rhythm is set by all the diegetic sounds, mainly dialogue and gunshots. What is interesting in this case is that the tension is built up by the dialogues. Here are present two kinds of dialogues, the real dialogues between the characters and the dialogues between the sounds. To a character's sentence, a gunshot replies,
Just a bit sooner than y'all was expecting.
The first one to talk is Django, and before hearing Billy crash, the audience hears a gunshot. This method proceeds similarly for the first phase, and all these actions, talking and shooting, take the place of the irregular music analysed in Leone's film. In addition to this, all the gunshots and blood sounds are heavily emphasised. This redundancy of seeing and hearing an exaggerated event amplifies the event itself. Moreover, the absence of non-diegetic music keeps the audience into real life. The silence between all the actions depicts reality and enhances the drama of the moment. Phase 2. Breaking point. From this moment, it is possible to hear also the non-diegetic music, which is moreover Morricone's theme for the Hellbenders. The presence of the music projects the images towards a destination, letting the audience to wait for a future event. Phase 3. Resolution. The music stops playing, and in a similar way, Django stops talking. Steve's voice and diegetic sounds bring back the audience to reality. The sound of the burning fuse causes a strong vectorization, as it induces the audience to wait for the explosion, causing tension. The tension built up during the whole sequence is solved with the big explosion. Conclusions. It is good to remember that the two analysed films deeply differ in the content and meaning. Tarantino's one is a film about slavery, Leone's one is a gold quest. And these differences are perceivable also from the music and the sound design. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly follows the tradition of the film music, even if Morricone used an unusual ensemble. Django Unchained follows the tradition of Tarantino's films, and so, in a lot of action scenes, the absence of music depicts the violence of reality. However, both films share some features, and one of the most important is the cruelty of the Far West.
Hey, boy! Django! You open